Hello everyone, welcome to the Edil weekly discussion. And I'm Sara Rajan. I'll be interviewing Bharati, Tamasodati member. This week, the topic we have chosen is the economic crisis or the coronavirus crisis in Sri Lanka. So we have already discussed this topic in Tamil, but in order to reach the wide audience, so we have chosen to do also in English. So we have seen the coronavirus pandemic has been spreading across all the nations, and as all the countries, Sri Lanka also took this matter very lightly in the beginning. They started preparing for the parliamentary election, and the president also, in a speech, urged the people of Sri Lanka to vote for his party, giving 2/3 for majority in the election. And he didn't utter a single word about the deteriorating economy and because the Sri Lanka has also, even before Corona, it was under debts and it was financially aided by all the big countries like the USA, China, and India. But after Corona, these big countries itself is suffering from the economic crisis. So my question to Bharati is how, after this, at this period, even when the Sri Lankan government couldn't get any aid from the other big countries, how they are tackling the economic situation right now?
That's it. Such an important question, Sarah. I mean, Sri Lanka, as you've already said, has gone into this crisis with a very heavy debt and a sluggish economic growth. They have a 72, at the end of December 2019, they have a $72 billion debt. Total debt of $72 billion and only a $21 billion GDP growth, which means that their growth clearly outweighs any debt that they got. They've already borrowed during the bloody civil war against the Tamil people. They've already borrowed a lot of money on weapons, etc. And that was on a low rate. But now with the world economies, the big economies in crisis, will they be able to carry on borrowing at a lower rate? The answer is no, they won't be, because the other economies won't be able to lend that money at a lower rate, which means that last month they borrowed $500 million from China, and they have plans of borrowing a further $2 billion from China, and there are all of this is in the name of a good for supporting government efforts, which basically means to bail out big businesses and to further try and stimulate their fiscal package to keep the economy going. They've got a decrease in tourism, which means Sri Lankan Airlines has gone into bankruptcy, and it's demanding a $30 billion bailout. At the end of this year, Sri Lanka needs to pay a $4.8 billion debt repayment, and that's the largest repayment, largest repayment for 1 year for the country in its history. And the question is, how will they repay this? And that's the question you already asked. The answer is that they've already, to bear in mind that they've already been borrowing to repay any of their loans. So they're borrowing to repay loans, and that's how they're running the economy at the moment. So would they be using this secret bailout that the government has not mentioned from the World Bank of $129 million? Or would they be using the $22 million from the EU to be paying this $4.8 billion repayment? In 2019, there was only a 2.3% GDP growth. That's again the lowest since 2001 for Sri Lanka. Gotabaya, during his election campaign, he'd said that he would use tourism and exports on garment exports to revive the economy, to bring the economy up. But that plan won't work anymore. That's out of the window. So they've used Sri Lanka's on zero defaults. They've used VAT cuts. They've announced VAT cuts, and the central government has said that there's zero deposit. They'll charge 0% on any deposits that's being paid. But this all indicates that they're very desperate for people to put money in and to start spending, because nobody has the money the poor, the workers, and the vulnerable. The poor, the workers, and the other section and the other communities in Sri Lanka don't really have the money. So this just means that big businesses who do have the money will be able to benefit from these small packages that they're announcing, and that it's a desperation that exists with the government, and they're trying to. It's almost like trying to resuscitate a dying economy, and the other question is that instead of doing that, would they say no and not repay any of their loans and take a bold move with this? But we'll have to see post crisis to see if this is something that the government is planning to do.
Yeah, that's true. And also one more thing about the coronavirus, the cliche we keep hearing about the coronavirus is like it affects everyone irrespective of their economic or the social inequality. Like everyone, the rich or poor, is affected. It might be true on one case, but when we see the impact or the consequences faced by this coronavirus, it's not true, because the poor people are most affected by it, either by physically or economically, financially or mentally, or whatever the case may be, but the poor are most affected. So we see the key workers, the key workers are the low-waged workers. Now they are called as key workers because there is no one to replace their work. All the sanitary works, all the nurses, doctors are called as the key workers. So how is the government taking a step to protect them from this coronavirus? Are given any PPEs or any other protective garments? And also to mention about the daily wage people, like people like tea plantation workers who has already fought for like 1,000 rupees per day, has now left with nothing but hunger. Just even after the daily wages, like auto drivers, garment industry people, like they are going to die out of hunger because they earn their daily wages. When they are asked to stay at home, they don't have any money. Is the government taking any like stimulus packages or welfare measures to take care of these people?
Of course, I mean, again, this crisis has further highlighted the divisions that already exist in society. So when people go around saying that there is no division, and after 2009, it's all the country's in peace and the economy is growing and everything is better, it's a lie, because everything was just whitewashed, and that is something that the kind of the ruling media wanted us to believe, the normal people to believe. But the reality is that no, the divisions have been further highlighted, and like you've already said, Sarah, that it's the poor that are affected by the coronavirus crisis further, mainly because of the living condition, their already existing living conditions, but most importantly, them being exploited day in, day out as workers as well. And Sri Lanka, in some terms, has escaped a bigger criticism compared to its South Asian neighbors because of its better healthcare, but better, not the best, because it's nationalized, but that doesn't mean that it's fully functional for its full purpose. It's not fully capable of dealing with a full-on coronavirus crisis. Hence, why the government is trying to enforce this severe lockdown measures. So there's already 500 ICU beds for a 21 million population, and that is nowhere near enough when it comes to a severe crisis, as we've already seen in the advanced developed economy countries such as Britain and America, where we're seeing a lot of deaths. The other thing that we need to mention is that the positive side of a nationalized economy, nationalized healthcare system means that it has more funding compared to a private sector, because it'll be run for just for profit. But also means that the doctors and nurses feel that they're more better equipped than they would in a private sector. We've already seen that in terms of Cuba and in China, where they've been able to send doctors to Italy. However, we need to mention that Cuba and China are no means model for a nationalized healthcare system. They're just examples of a state-run healthcare system. The other thing that we also need to mention is that by years of privatization of the UNP and the SLFP government has meant that Sri Lanka's healthcare is in quite fragile than it would have been prior to the privatizations. An airfield hospital has been built and it's been open, and although it seems that it's a good idea, it only can house a certain number of people, patients, but at the same time, it can only it cannot deal with it's in one location. It cannot deal with a huge number of influx of patients. It doesn't have the required ventilators. Neither does it have any. Neither does it have the doctors or the nurses required to function those areas. So, which means that we have to. There's a need for ventilators, as we have seen across the globe, because there's a huge demand for ventilators at the moment. So private companies are trying to sell these ventilators at ridiculously high prices and trying to make money and exploit further even in this crisis. We would say that governments need to turn local factories into making ventilators and take it into government ownership and make ventilators as required by the country. The positive cases of patients with coronavirus are getting treated in Colombo, and which means that is not sufficient. People across the country, patients across the country cannot always be transported to Colombo. There are areas which are difficult for the ambulance to access, which means that there is an immediate need for for hospitals to be fully functional for COVID patients across the country, whether it be in the Northeast, the South, central provinces, but there also needs to be an increased capacities. All the private hospitals and clinics need to be converted to be able to treat COVID patients, including the more staffing going into all those areas. At the same time, there's been spot checks that are taking place, which is not something that we would it's not something we would promote, because that's on a voluntary basis of the people who are being tested. There would be an immediate need for all local clinics to be open in all communities, and for communities for patients who are showing symptoms or who would want to go and get tested, including those of their families. There is an immediate need for frontline workers. That is not just healthcare workers. There's any worker that is coming across across people and also in contact with public to be tested, including their families, but also immediate PPE, sufficient PPE to be given to these workers. And if in cases there is not sufficient PPE, the government needs to take over factories again, such as garment factories, and convert them to make PPE, which is protective equipment. But at the same time, the government has also put a law in saying that public need to walk around with face masks, which means that the government should supply these face masks again that can be made in factories and be given out, because that's there is resources for it, especially in a country like Sri Lanka. And Sarah, the important point that you made is that these people, these frontline workers, are the most exploited because they're not well paid enough, but all of a sudden they become key workers. And this terminology saying key workers is just to kind of glorify and say like kind of an attempt to say that, oh yeah, they're playing an important role, but we will not do anything about increasing their wages or their living conditions. Um, but the reality is that if these workers didn't work, the economy, the country would come to a standstill, and that is why they are key workers. They are key workers because of the key role they play in running the economy. So the government needs to better their living conditions. They need to get an immediate pay rise. In the role they play, and the equipment that they need in order to do the jobs that they do. Um, the other thing is there is also plantation workers who are still working when the plantation workers from private sectors they were still working when government plantation workers have been stopped. So this again is another example of private sectors trying to exploit further and make more money when even during this crisis, not considering the dangers that exist for the workers who can easily it's difficult for them to maintain social distancing in the job that they do, but also for them to go back and spread it amongst their families and their loved ones when they do live in very close-knit houses, which again there hasn't been any transformation of their houses for years, even though there's been promises of new houses being built. And also there are larger families because in underdeveloped economies, you do have larger families living in smaller rooms, which means that people have to sleep outside, and the old and the very young, who are both quite shouldn't really be in the same room in terms of the corona crisis, being under one room. That again, there should be an immediate change of that in terms of the living conditions and housing conditions, but also in terms of the houses that are in terms of the loss of pay that the workers would face. There needs to be no loss of pay, and the government needs to immediately pay them the loss of pay that they would pay, and take these private companies into ownership when they are exploiting the workers. Also, these packages that have been announced, 5,000 rupees for certain sections, such as low daily wage workers, as you mentioned, and also low income or vulnerable people like older people who will not be on any income. Not everybody is able to get it because not everybody is registered solely to be able to get it. Some people are registered with their children, etc. At this time, and they'll be scared to go out and register because of the curfew that's been in place. So there needs to be an overseeing of this of these issues for local communities, and to ensure that everyone who needs access to it to be registered by the local electives and get the funding that they do need. But at the same time, there's all these packages that they were there's all these there's NGOs that have been giving out food parcels, such as rice, basic necessity rice and other food items, which is again highlights the failure of the government, because even though it's emergency relief, it hasn't really accessed all communities, because there's not been a community overseeing of this. Again, the government has announced reduction of prices in certain things like sardines and dal, but in a time where fish is getting caught and getting dumped back into sea, or there isn't enough people to buy the food in the market because of farmers mainly not being able to go into market, the government can easily buy basic necessities such as rice and main grains, as well as the fish from the fishermen and the farmers, and give them to the daily wage workers or people who will have a loss of income, the poor, homeless, and other vulnerable sections, as for free, and make ensure that they were fully fed in a crisis like this, instead of trying to just announce it on certain items, which would it is in an attempt to a political attempt to whip up more nationalism. We also need to mention that this two-thirds majority that they're trying to get is another reason to why that they've tried to bring this whole corona crisis into control. They want to be seen as the regime that can bring it under control and further gain the electoral get an electoral gain. So they're trying to capitalize in even in this crisis. The president can reconvene the parliament in a time of emergency crisis, even if he's dissolved it earlier. He's dissolved it before September because he needs a two-third majority, but also he's not reconvened it to run the country. Instead, he's trying to ensure that the president and the prime minister are the only Rajapaksa regime that are capable of bringing this crisis into control. And it needs to be noted that during this crisis that they can possibly get a majority, because if it was post-crisis, and we'll go on to talk about the conditions that will exist then, that may exist then, they're less likely to win a majority, and it is possible that the UMP government can come into power. So again, it's all for a political gain, and it's not in the name of the mass majority of the population, which are the poor, the workers, and the ethnic minorities.
True, Bali, it's very clear. The thing is, when this current situation is so alarming, we also need to talk about the life after Corona, because we already started seeing the glimpse of it. Because there's even before Corona, there's a rise in populism, and the Buddhist nationalism, and also a rise in xenophobia. And recently, we have seen also the removal of the 19th Amendments. And right now, 2 weeks ago, there's also the independence of the election commission is also been challenged. So we also need to look after, as you said, the Rajapaksa regime is taking this corona emergency as an opportunity to build a power base. So they wanted to bring an authoritarian government, and as these coronavirus measures are put to the people as a Trojan horse to as a human right threat. They are gonna we could clearly see they are implementing the military and the police to bring all the measures, so they can clearly threat the human rights of the Sri Lankan people. So how the life after Corona is going to be for the people of Sri Lanka when these people win the two by third of majority, and when they establish this kind of nepotism, and all the government officials are from the Rajapaksa's family, all the brothers, cousin brothers, everyone. So how this is going to be affect the Sri Lankan people?
I mean, shortly put, Sarah, for the question to how will life be, shortly put, not good. But to further discuss this, there would be a huge unemployment, workers who have lost their work, jobs, and not likely to regain it. There would be an increased poverty, which would lead to further increasing ethnic tensions, and attacks on minorities, such as Muslims, minority communities such as Muslim community, which we've already seen during the crisis anyway, where the government was forcing Muslim communities who lost their loved ones during the via COVID-19 to cremate them when that hasn't been the world practice, and there are safer ways to bury the dead, to carry out funeral practices, but also that we need to defend the right for any community to practice their religion or faith in any time, but also be able to practice it safely. So there needs to be a local community overseeing. But we would see a polarized country. So a polarized country also means a significant impact for the Tamil people. They would be in order to stop the masses, the vast majority of the people, the workers, from rising from this from anger. The government will try and put control measures. So they would increase their army personnel, and they would increase police checks. So we've already seen government officials coming out during the Sinhala Tamil New Year and announcing, congratulating the police and the army in the jobs that they're doing. But yeah, so we've already seen that, but that just means that's further indication of where they are going. Also means that these police who have been arresting, so there's 2,000 people who have been arrested, and during the corona curfew, and they which is not a good thing, because we've seen across the globe more prisoners being released. But Sri Lanka instead is putting more people behind bars. They've released a few for their political gain, but political prisoners still remain imprisoned, and the guards and the prisoners are in danger, and it's impossible to maintain social distancing and safe measures in times like this. This government will grow towards an authoritarian government, but also a repressive state, which would mean that it's a huge attack on democratic rights of workers and minorities. With a world economy system it's in a bad state, and world economy is already shrinking. We're going to see the biggest collapse in history, and it's very difficult to recover from the scale of collapse. And for an $87 billion economy such as Sri Lanka, does it really have any choice? What's it going to do? They will try and use quantitative easing to have some money flowing in. But across the globe, where the world economies are the ruling groups, the bourgeois, are globally abandoning the neoliberal policies, and they're going into state intervention. There's a deglobalization that's taking place. That means that the nation states, this concept of nation states, is strengthening. Although the national mood is to back the government now, voting for this government again it is like a death sentence. So the trade union leaders, why are they sleeping on this? Where is the so-called left? We see people who call themselves left defending the current government, but at the same time they're putting the blame on people. That doesn't look very good, because it doesn't look like there is an alternative. So it's important at this time that the workers, the poor, students, and various other minority groups need to come together and build a mass workers movement. This needs to be alongside other fighting forces who are willing to take an independent position away from the state and be able to reject the state completely. This is the only time that this is the time that we can build this, because in the 1930s there was a Great Depression, but the loss of productive forces meant that the capitalism was able to, the world system was able to reboot itself then, but now that choice doesn't exist anymore. So we need to build our own fight back. And for a country that's going into recession, which, by the way, the figures that the government has provided are very, very modest figures, that's not the reality, but there is even a possibility of depression. We need to build a fight back, because this is for your generations to come, like for your families, for your children, the generation to come, who are going to suffer. So they will come after you. So in order to the only choice is that building the fighting force, and an independent fighting force. But at the same time, if you're in England, join Tamil Solidarity, because what we put out, you can read it. Very importantly, read our material. But if you think you know better and you can debate, you have another point of view, by all means come and debate with us.
That's a very important statement, because as you said, this is the very good opportunity for all the left to join together, all the allied forces to come together to build a united struggle. As we know, we also need to fight for all the workers PPE, and all the workers should be given the enough PPE, because we see there are many NGOs providing these food parcel and the PPEs to the people, but the government is not ready to do it. Why should NGO do it but not the government? When these masks and all the other garments are available for the people, the government should nationalize these factories, and they have to provide these things to the people. And also we should make sure that the workers, everybody who couldn't work or who cannot work at this point of time, should be all the welfare measures, and also the frontline workers must be given the all the protective measures as well, and testing must be done to everyone, each and everyone, as WHO says. As you said, only spot checks are done right now. So instead of spot checks, everyone has to be tested, and because it is a very good thing. Like, on a positive note, it's a very good thing. Like among the South Asian countries, Sri Lanka has a better healthcare, as you said. But there are measures taken by these authoritarian government to privatize it. We should protect these healthcare, education, and we should start at this point. This is a very good opportunity for the left. So we should all unite together. We know we are suffering individually, but suffering individually and murmuring to ourselves doesn't help. We should unite together. So if, as you said, if the audience, if you are interested in this video, please pass it to the people who think will be benefited from this. And also we are working closely with the trade union. So by working with trade union, we can win many rights. So if you wish to join trade union, by any means you can contact us. And also we are all writing many perspective articles and the documents, and if you are happy to read it in Tamil, you can read it from the edit.org, or if you wish to read it in English, you can read from tamilsolidarity.org. So please join with us and also support us. Please like our page and also subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you.